A very good day to y'all. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm recording an episode with Tayo. Is that how I pronounce it correctly? I must
Correct, yeah.
apologize off the bat because I had a conversation with Karen from the Meaning Code and I pronounced it Teo because that's how I saw it written.
Uh, most, I think 80% of people pronounce it Teo, and that's also fine by me. I'm not that fussy.
Okay, awesome.
I think even within my family, I've got both Teo and Tayo. So
You
it
don't have a
doesn't
preference?
either. I don't actually, because it's the full name is Temi Tayo Falai, so it's just half of a name. So say
All right.
whichever way you rest your tongue.
That's beautiful though. I like Tayo. It sounds a bit more authentic. Feel like we Americanize everything. Like I market myself as Lucas nowadays, but it's not how you pronounce my name at all.
How do you pronounce it?
Lucas.
Lucas.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Anyway, so I came across Tayo on Karen's channel, The Meaning Code, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with, and I really liked his story. I liked his ideas, and I like the way that Tayo entered into conversation with Karen. It was very sincere and in good faith. So Tayo, why don't you tell us a bit about how you grew up, a bit about your story?
Yeah, we were just speaking earlier about the importance of story. Uh, mine people are endlessly complicated, and trying to succinct your story can be a bit more difficult. So I I'll start with my parents, always the easiest place to start. My dad is Nigerian. Both my parents are Nigerian, but my dad was born in England. Because my grandparents had the foresight to make sure to have the last two children. My dad and his little sister have uh British waiting for them to get British passports, which came in very handy because they passed away whilst my dad was still young, and the my dad's oldest sister sort of became the matriarch of the family, and I ended up living with her actually because my parents broke up if they were ever together when I was around 5 years old. My dad moved to back to England. My mom was still in Nigeria, but my mom's also got. I am on my mom's side. I'm the last born. On my dad's side, I'm the firstborn. So on my mom's side, I've got six or seven older siblings, whereas on my dad's side, I've got three younger siblings. So very complicated uh union I was birthed into, so to speak. But for the most part, no complaints because I grew up with my auntie and my uncle who were, my uncle was an elder and my auntie was a prophet. So church was very important. I was introduced to the stories of the Bible very, very young. And growing up in Nigeria, electricity is not 24 hours. You get it an hour to a day, maybe if you're lucky, and it's quite sporadic. So I spent a lot of time reading, and I really, really enjoyed the biblical stories. There was a there was a book given by the Jehovah's Witnesses called book of the big stories in the Bible. So Daniel, uh oh, am I still there? It's gone blurry
Yeah,
a little
you
bit.
were lost for a bit. What was the title of the book?
My book of Bible stories, I
Yeah.
think it's what it was called. And it was a graphic novel of all of the big stories in the Bible, going from Genesis to Revelation. Now with a JW lens to it, but for the most part, the images, the stories, I was captivated by them. So I'm very biblical literate in that way, as far as the stories are concerned, because most of my childhood was spent rereading those stories. So that's how I grew up. And around the age of 12, I left Nigeria and moved in with my dad in England. He had married and had my little brother by then. So I moved in with my dad, my stepmom, and my half brother at 12 years old, going from Nigeria to England, which a lot of cognitive dissonance happens there because you're moving from, I was moving from a very communal area where the neighbors all knew each other's business to a not always helpful degree, but it was communal. When it say takes a village, it really did take a village. The neighbor feels just as entitled to discipline any misbehaving child as the parent do. So it's that sort of environment that I grew up in, to one where we barely know our neighbors over here. Like people don't go outside, kids don't go outside to play the way I did back then. So there was a lot of cognitive distance. But then I found internet, which you can as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, you can imagine what the internet had to offer, and how much I was just giving to that word to an extent. So yeah, um I've been pretty much Christian of different degree most of my life, and in 2020 was when I discovered this little corner, and that was off the back of the Peugeot and Peterson conversation,
Mm.
which I think quite a lot of people resonated with, because at the Chino conference where I met Karen Wong, a lot of people, or quite a significant amount of people, mentioned that that conversation was their entry point
Ah, yeah.
to the little corner, at least to make them stay in the little corner, even if they were previously aware of it.
Yeah.
So that's what brought me in. And at that point of my faith, um I was Christian, but also I was spiritual, but not religious. So in that way of anti-institutions, think that the church is pretty much past this. It's used by date, and the best way to be Christian was to be Christian alone,
Mm.
which uh, spending time listening to Paul van der Klee and Peugeot, they'll tell you to go to church enough time. And I
Yeah.
think after about the 100th time of me listening to them say go to church, I took on the challenge and went back to church, and yeah, I've stayed ever since.
What is the church you go to now?
Well, the church I did go to was King's Church.
Ah, yeah.
That was when I was in Manchester, but I recently moved from Manchester back to London,
Okay.
and I'm attending a church called Streatham Church London.
And what types of churches are these? Are they similar to each other?
Uh, in a way, yeah, mostly sort of non-denominational,
Mm.
but the King's Church is an affiliate of denomination denominations, at least, because they're all independent churches just under a similar umbrella. And I think the Church of Christ, which is quite a big, they've got loads of different types of churches under that umbrella, but
Yep.
it's mostly Pentecostal or Protestant denomination.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, as a child, you said you were pretty immersed into the Bible, so you read a lot of the stories. Is there one particular story that you like the most, and has that changed over time?
All right. Oh, that is a great question. I think as a thinking back to, I remember resonating more like being wowed a lot by the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In the fire pit, the three Jewish men that refused to bow and then got thrown in the fire, and then mainly because there's a phrase that they say, which is, "We believe that our God can save us,
Mm.
but even if it doesn't, we still won't bow to your idol." And
Yeah.
I found that so cool. I found that was like the coolest thing to say in the face of
Yeah.
danger. So I think as a kid, a lot of like the Daniel stories, a lot
Yeah.
I resonated. I reading because of the illustrations, like Daniel ripping the mouth of the lion. All of those I thought was cool. But moving on, the book in the Bible that I think it's, if not my favorite, but it's constantly in the top three. I was like a young teen, going through the teen angst, whatever, all of the hormones, all of just processing, trying to be a grown up. But I remember reading Ecclesiastes, and the version that I read had this phrase of everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind.
Mm.
And I love that image of chasing the wind. And just the entire verse was something I didn't think was in the Bible. This
Mm.
wasn't in my book of stories of the Bible. It was an existential plea with just someone dealing with some form of nihilism, like just genuine existentialism, which
Yeah.
I've always resonated with. I've always been more of an existential thinker in whatever way that means. So reading Ecclesiastes made me feel seen by the Bible, made me feel like the darker thoughts that I have sometimes can also be found in scripture. So that became my favorite book.
Well, yeah, I'm not as Bible steady myself. I grew up, we read the Bible every night, um, after dinner, but I can't say that everything sticks, you know? And I've tried to read it now all for myself, which I did, but still it's not an integrated thing, and you don't live through the stories when you just read it alone. Um, so it's a bit different. But I really like the first story you mentioned, because
Yeah.
it reminds me a lot of something that I heard recently, actually on the Joe Rogan podcast, where they were describing execution of these Christians. I don't know exactly what the context was historically speaking, but that they were being executed and they were praying for the people executing them. Like, I, I hope you're forgiven, you know, like I pray you'll be forgiven. And just speaking about the executioners, like those people are never going to sleep again. Like imagine. So that's really the most badass like stance you can take. Yeah, yeah,
Isn't it? It's like a full-on inverse. Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Like you are like you're messed up right now. Good luck. All right. Well, there was a lot in your story. I want to go back a bit to family, because you said you couldn't
Mm.
complain. You couldn't complain. You know, like you got a lot. I think for a lot of people hearing your story, they're like, "Wow, this is such a tough way of growing up." You don't experience it this way at all? Did you have times where you did experience it this way? How do you look back on it now, and how did you experience it then?
Yeah. So when I was staying with my auntie, my dad's older sister, I was staying with their family. They had four children. All the youngest was 8 years older than me, and I was I think 2 years after I joined them, my dad's younger sister. So my dad and his younger sister both moved back to the UK in 2000, and I went to stay with my auntie straight away in 2000. And I think a year or so later, my dad's little sister's daughter, so my cousin, came to join us. So there were six children in the house. Four belonged to my uncle and my auntie, were the biological children. Then there was me and my cousin. Um, I remember sort of being the favorite of me and my between me and my cousin within the family. And I think that was because even as a kid, we were living in just deep poverty at times where there was no there's nowhere, no one knows where the next meal is coming from, where the daily the Lord's Prayer of asking for daily bread became really, really important. So and those times I remember being very unbothered. I was a very simple kid. Let me out to go play football when I and yeah, that was pretty much it. Just give me let me out to go play football and make sure I've got books to read when I'm stuck inside. Those were the needs that I have. When there's food, fine, we'll eat. If there's no food, there's no food. That's how it is. So I think for that reason, because I was a very unproblematic and unbothered child, I was the favorite between me and my cousin because she was, I think, a little bit more fussy in the way, like dealing with the difficulty of things.
Yeah.
But I think naively, and even as I've grown older, I'm very low in negative emotions.
Mm.
So I process difficult things sort of naively, easily,
Yeah.
and I don't often realize just how dire the situations I'm in is.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a role.
All right.
And also, people from broken homes don't get the chance to grow up in a stable. When my parents broke up, I went into probably the most stable environment I could have been in.
Ah, yeah.
If I had stayed with either of my parents, I would have been with a single parent. But no, I stayed in a two-parent home and sort of I was raised as one of their kids. So that gave me a stability that I think I'm grateful for compared to other children from broken homes.
Yeah. And you didn't have what kids have today, I think, which it's a lot of broken homes, and it's also phones, iPads, TV shows, not a lot of interaction, not a lot of human connection, let's say. So in many ways, I think it,
Yeah,
yeah,
there are
giving.
a lot of distractions available to kids now that I didn't have back then that I'm grateful for.
Do you still play football at all?
Yes, yes, I do. I
Nice.
mean, even at Chino, I think by the second day I was at Walmart shopping for a football or soccer ball, as they.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I recently started playing again as well. It's been such a joy. I played throughout my life recreationally, and sometimes when I was later, like 15 years old, I think I started playing in a team. That was different. But now I'm playing like with the team. It's like 40 people, but the teams change every week, and it's so much fun. Just like 30-year-olds,
It is.
40-year-olds.
I am speaking of activities that to do instead of looking at screens. Playing football has helped me immensely, just as a person.
Yeah,
And integrating from Nigeria to UK, football played a massive role. I remember the the first time I felt like I was seen at my new school
yeah,
was at the playground playing football. We played a game called Nutmeg Rush in the UK, which is if you put the ball through someone's leg, if you do a panel, everyone gets to beat up the person
yeah.
that
I
the ball
know
went
it.
through their leg.
I played it. It's really good.
Yeah, and I was I was no I was I was seen putting the ball through someone's leg and that person got beat up and then someone came up to me and was like, okay, can you put the ball through that person's leg? So of targeting someone that they want to have a fight with, so to speak. I remember doing that, and from that moment I was sort of welcomed into like the
Yeah,
the club, so to speak. So football's helped me making friends, and if I was in Los Angeles, a different country, I was staying with Jacob, who's someone that's done in this little corner. And he and I were going for a walk. I saw someone playing football by having training by himself. I was like, Jacob, I have to join him. I can't resist.
yeah.
So it helps with me making friends, integrating myself in different communities. Football's played a massive, massive role in that. So
That's
yeah,
beautiful.
sports is good.
Yeah. I think that's foundational, right? Like play. Peterson always speaks about this. Like I really notice it now that I see it, now that I've like educated myself a bit on what play actually can do. I'm playing football now and I'm seeing like how much it helps just setting the relationship between people and civilizing each other basically in that process. It's very special. And I think people don't have play a lot as adults, you know? So so that's
Yeah.
very nice. So coming back to the question, I wanted to ask you what family means to you today.
Oh, you have no idea how deep a question that is, especially for me.
Mm.
Um, I've I'm sort of seen as I've cast myself. No one's put me in the role, but I've put myself in the role of sort of the black sheep of the family in my uh both my immediate family and also external family. So because like I detailed earlier, I'm the only child my parents had together, but they were never together. Whereas my other siblings all have siblings that are full siblings. So I'm the outsider in that sense, but also in the sense of the being, for example, being in this little corner, I couldn't even begin to explain to my family the things that I find salient in this little corner and expect that it will make sense to them. So I've always found things interesting that are slightly weird to my family,
Mm.
because there's a privilege that I've got that I'm very aware of, that everyone else is also aware of, that I'm not making full use of, and simply by being in Europe, being or
Mm,
not by. I've got cousins who are still playing football, hoping to get signed by a team outside of Nigeria so they can get out of Nigeria
yeah.
because that's sort of that's the strategy. So family to me means responsibility because I have to look after not just my mom who's still in Nigeria, but my cousins that I grew up with who are still there. But family also means that responsibility part. I think I failed at miserably for the most part. I've only started taking that seriously the last 2 years or so. Uh,
What made you take it seriously?
what made me take it seriously is my second answer to what family means to me, which would be my faith.
Mm,
So there's an idea in Christianity of the church being a body. And I like that image of a body where everyone's got different roles for a family. And when I began to take my faith seriously, I began to take, okay, so I am a Christian. I do want to live more my life to reflect the life of a Christian, whatever that means. Now, I'm still not quite sure what that means, but what I do know is it starts with love, and it starts with I know the gifts I've been given, and I have to give that back to others, and so that's you can see how that will lead me to take my responsibility more seriously, take my privilege more seriously, and using what my privilege affords me to try to help those that aren't as privileged. So family means church to me now because a lot of the people at church I consider family.
yeah.
Uh, it's our community, that's our body that I like to think of as a family.
Well, that's a big family to take care of. It's beautiful. I think family is foundational for faith as well. I don't know where I heard it discussed. I think Fafeki discussed this that the loss of the family is also correlated to the loss of faith, and it makes so much sense. It's such a deep level of connectedness when you're with family, and that love you speak about. That's I think what glues it together. Um, I really recognize it in my own life where I got it, but I never gave it back, and now I just want to give it back as much as possible. Trying to do.
I
Um,
watched your conversation with your dad. That was beautiful, man. That
Thanks, man.
was
Thank you so much.
powerful. Yeah.
I uh, I owe my parents everything. Like they give you so much, and they don't even expect anything back, and then finally having this opportunity is very special. I wanted to ask you what you think your part to play is in this world. I think you're already alluding to it a little bit because I always think about this question for myself. I'm a young person, so I'm always like, what am I supposed to be doing? I think I'm getting closer to it with this channel. What do you think that is for you? Have you thought about that?
Um, yes. Given that that's a good question and a very important one. And one that I've been working on with a few members of my estuaries. It's one that keeps coming up in estuary meetings that in Manchester estuary meetings anyway. The best I've come up with is okay, so I'll flesh out what happened in 2020 a little bit more. So in 2020, I watched the Peugeot uh Peterson conversation. And I was like, oh yes, Peterson's completely right. The church is not doing enough. But then I listened to Peugeot and he's explaining a version of Christianity that just sounds foreign to me, but also makes the most sense.
Yeah.
More sense than any other version of Christianity I've ever heard before. So I remember I left a comment in that video, which I rarely do because I don't know what to comment. The comment was, "Where can I find people who speak like this, who have conversations like this, something like that?" And lo and behold, I found Paul. But throughout all of this, watching these conversations going up, there was like a spiritual don't know what word to use, like transformation taking place in my heart. Well, I felt like I was wrestling with God, and the question seems to circle around this question of what does it look like to be a Christian? And I've been Christian most of my life. I've had Christian transformation twice in my life previously where I was like, oh, I'm crying, this is God, you're everything. And each time it just sort of peters out in a way, and I
Yeah.
end up in places where, yeah. So this one was going to be different. I felt it was going to be different. And the reason it was, as well as finding all of this, I discovered N.T. Wright, it was like an archbishop in the UK. And I watched a few of his sermons where where he was explaining what the resurrection meant, and how the resurrection was the beginning of recreation, and being a Christian is being invited into that process of recreation. That blew my mind because I was aware of the you die, you go to hell or heaven sort of narrative of Christianity. And he was painting a picture that was more participatory
Mm.
in that new creation process
Yeah.
that I found very, very enticing. So I wanted like to okay, how do I participate? What do I do? And I sort of alluded to it earlier. The in my spiritual just wrestling with God moment, so to speak, the only answer that I just kept getting back was love. Just love, 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 love. I remember I was like, okay, that means I was searching for care jobs. Like that's the most loving thing I can do. Just give up my job currently and go help the less vulnerable, the people that are not looked after by society. Um, that wasn't it. That wasn't the road that God, well, because I applied for a few things, nothing really came through of it, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel like the right thing. So this is a long-winded winded answer to your
I
question,
love
but
it.
it's to do with this wrestling with this question of purpose that I've been doing since I rediscovered my faith in this form. And right now, um, there's the story that comes up in my brain is the story of the parable of the talents, and the different amount of talents given to different amount of people.
Mm.
And I felt previously um I was the one hiding my talent and not wanting to use it. Just I didn't give it back as it was given. And I feel like in this season of my life, my purpose is to stop hiding the talent and start using it for the benefit of others. So I think the purpose questions changes over time. I think the constant answer is love,
Yeah.
but how that is applied might change.
Manifests differently. I hear you. I hear you. And you can follow it, like you say, like you can apply it to something. If it doesn't work, it's a sign that it's something else. But the main idea is clear.
Yeah,
So however that will manifest itself, I think you're following it very well. So thank you for
I
that.
yeah, I'm trying trying to.
That's all we can do, right? I mean, I don't think
Exactly.
we will ever really get there where we're like, oh yes, I'm doing exactly what I have to do. I think that's really the beauty of moving closer toward an ideal or Christ, whatever you want to call it, that is never ending, that search. And because it's never ending, it's so valuable.
I love Karen's analogy of the asymptote. So you
Yeah.
just constantly getting closer and closer and closer and closer, but not quite there yet. At least not until the
No.
next.
No, and that motivates me. I think that's how dopamine works as well. Like you get more when you're moving toward it than actually having the ice cream itself, you know? Like
Yeah,
here you also get
exactly. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, that's exactly how dopamine works. It's
yeah.
that reach.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so I'd like to take a bit of a turn back because we've been discussing estuary, this little corner, some names that people might not be familiar with. I'd like to just start with the start. I want to see if we can try to define this little corner. So why don't you start and I'll see if I can add anything.
Yeah, this little corner is not it's not easy to pin down. Firstly, I don't think it's a corner. It's more like a network of uh mostly YouTube activities and
Mm,
YouTube personalities centered around the meaning making. Uh part of our I'm currently making a documentary about Speaker's Corner tied to this. Part of what I take from the little corner is it introduces a way of having conversation that's more what I think with Vicky call Phileo Sophia than Phileo Nike or something like that.
so
So
what's the
it's more less confrontational
yeah.
and less of a argumentative form of conversation, and it actually encourages
Mm,
listening to the person that you have a conversation with and then responding rather than listening to respond. You're listening first, then responding. Um, I another that's the sort of the broad definition. My interest lies in what I think TW is another personality coined the Christian diaspora of the little corner, and it's a segment of the this network that are Christians or Christians heretics who are, for one reason or the other, don't feel at home in the current state of Christendom, whichever way that might be. Now, that's a lot of Protestants people, even Catholic and Orthodox. They are making home in this, creating us an ecumenical sort of diaspora where you've got Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox having conversations and treating each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. That's a part of this little corner that I find very interesting. How do you see it? I'm very curious to see.
I always like the idea of the meaning crisis that connects a bit um, across the little corner, because I think Vervaeke plays such a central role um, that that almost can't be neglected. So the idea is basically, I think network is a very good word for it actually. So there's a couple of main figures. We've got Paul van der Klei, who is he a, what would you call him, a pastor? What is the,
Yeah, he's a pastor from the CRC denomination.
yeah. So we've got Paul van der Klei, who's very prominent. Kind of a lot of people come in through Jordan Peterson, who's a very big YouTube personality, who's not, I don't think explicitly a Christian, but I think he's brought more people to Christianity than most
More
any,
pastors.
yeah, doesn't make any sense. Um, Then you have John Vervaeke, who is a cognitive scientist who had a lot of trouble with Christianity, specifically fundamentalist Christianity. And he sees answers to this crisis in meaning in other paths like Neoplatonism and even Buddhism, I would say, all sorts of practices. And then you have Jonathan Pageau, who's an Orthodox Christian, who is, I think, extremely captivating, who really represents the Orthodox viewpoint in such an enticing and interesting manner. It's like I think a lot of people listen to him thinking, I don't understand you, but you're making so much sense that I just want to keep listening. And he,
That's my experience.
yeah, and he offers like answers to questions that people in Christian circles rarely had answers to, and you can just keep on asking with him. Um, So there is a lot of Christianity in this little corner, but there is also definitely, I would say, room for others who really cannot identify with that. And I think the overarching theme here, like you said, is meaning making. And yeah, people in this little corner, they follow a lot of these thinkers. They have conversations with each other, which is, I think, where Estuary comes in. And I know you are involved with Estuary more so than I am. So what is Estuary exactly? Where does the name come from, and what does it look like practically?
Yeah, before I answer that, just really quickly, I want to add on to that. I made a comment after the Chino conference that sort of surprised a few of the people that I was with, and it was that John Vervaeke might be the most important figure in this little corner.
Mm,
I think it's for the reason you sort of alluded to. He holds the space for people that don't feel like they belong anywhere for the most part, people that are still searching. And I think this generation is filled with mostly seekers and people that are still searching. Very few of us feel like we're at home in the place that we're at. And Viveki holds that space for those people to explore what he calls his ecology of practices. So I agree with your assessment. Estuary is the birth birth child of John Van Dunk and Paul van der Klee. Paul van der Klee is the preacher he's from Sacramento, the CRC picture. He's prominent in the little corner. John Van Dunk less so. He's a friend of Paul van der Klee. He's also in the CRC, so he's a Christian, but he's got a very, very interesting story that's detailed. Just he was a pastor, he's no longer a pastor.
mm,
He's got it's got a lot of things that most Orthodox Christians might, a lot of these that most Orthodox Christians might look at side eye. So the estuary is the idea that churches should be a place where people come to have meaningful conversation without having the worry of being preached at or being having to convert on the spot. Just a space for people with questions to have conversations. Paul van der Klee had been doing a lot of randos conversations where random people on the internet emails him and he just have a conversation with them. And he said that he's had more meaningful conversation. He had more meaningful conversation online than he did staying at his church where no one would come to the church thinking this is a place to ask the deep questions.
yeah.
So it's what it is. It's a conversation protocol. It's a protocol that helps people in a group have conversation. And the intent is, he described it as sort of the courtyard in front of the church. So it's not come in and, have communion with us and you have to believe what we believe, or it's come in and ask your questions. You don't need to be Christian. You don't even need to like Christians. But if you've got questions about meaning, there is a meaning crisis, as Vivek is very clearly alluded to, and churches should have a role to play in a meaning crisis. And estuary is of a way the church can participate in at least the conversation of the meaning crisis.
Yep. And I think the term itself, it means where salt and sweet water meet.
Yeah,
So the idea, you get a mix of people, let's say, from different.
exactly
Okay.
right.
I hadn't heard the connection with the church yet before. Oh, let's see if we lost him. You still here?
Yep. Good
Yeah.
got you. Yeah.
Awesome.
What's the last thing you said? Sorry.
I hadn't heard the connection with the church yet, because I didn't know that estuary was intrinsically linked to churches.
It isn't. It isn't intrinsically linked to
Mm,
churches, but in its conception, it was that was part of how estuary came to be.
okay.
Now I'm part of the estuary leadership network that Van Dunk hosts, and it is mostly Christians, but there are a lot of non-Christians or even people that were Christian are deconstructed but are still trying to have meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
So the tellus is, it's a protocol to encourage this conversation in a group. So it can be used anywhere, but as far as churches, it's a tool that churches can use to get involved in the meaning crisis conversation.
Okay, I hear you. I have an estuary here in the Netherlands. It's very small, and I don't know how you experience your estuary, but for me, it's such a weird thing to actually see some of these people in real life coming out of their little basements or wherever. It's like people that have been watching the same YouTube videos and then just talking about it. It's so weird because
Oh
same
my
with
gosh.
you. We have such an overlap, in influences. It's
It was the first estuary meetings I hosted, I did off the back of Van der Klee and Van der Klee's presence it was in England, and I sort of marketed it as a estuary meeting, but Vanderklay will be there. So in a way, it was kind of a quasi PVK meetup
Yep.
group, and it was very strange because prior to that, I thought I was pretty much the only person in the country that was watching all of these characters. And then watching all of this, people emerge from the shadows, like you said, like sort of crawl out of the YouTube basement, like I
Yeah.
need to, me too. It was so cool. And now some of those people are like some of my close, I'm very close with. Yeah, it's been really cool.
That's very special. Do you find that there's largely agreements in your views, or do you are you?
Um,
Sorry, yeah.
but in the Manchester Estuary, which has been the one that's been the most thriving, I was the only Christian in the group. So
Oh,
in terms of worldviews, very different worldviews. But it was still there were the Manchester one. There were a lot of people that were paying attention to the conversation in this little corner, as we call it. So there was some overlap there because we've been watching similar characters and similar personalities on YouTube. But in terms of what we believe in practice, very different, which makes for way more interesting conversation.
yeah.
Like you said, the idea of estuary is saltwater and freshwater meeting. It's not just a pool of freshwater, but having each other on the things they agree on.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I really I used to fear speaking with people that look at the world fundamentally differently than I do. And now
Mm.
I quickly get bored if I have the same life experience as another person or if I believe exactly the same thing. So actually I love speaking with people that I disagree with because there's always something to learn and something to teach. And yeah, I do hope that Estuary gets more different perspectives, um, more challenges, let's say.
Oh man,
Um,
the last estuary, I'm looking to start. Well, I've already started an estuary in London, but at Speaker's Corner, and boy, was that a collection of very, very different and strong opinions and worldviews.
yeah,
So that was it's challenging, but like you said, in the differences, there's a lot of opportunity for learning.
yeah.
And even if it's just updating my own ignorance about different worldviews that I've not lived in, people that are participating and living that worldview are better informed about it than I would be. So I can learn that from them at least.
I think it's important that it's a dialogue, and not a debate. I think that can go wrong very quickly. But when it's there, it's such a special experience, I think. So
It is
yeah,
so much so that this yesterday at Speaker's Corner, one of the guys is a Jewish guy that participated was like, when's the next one? When's the next one? Because going from the debate style conversations that he's used to a one where there's actual dialogue, like you said, there's a listening, and yeah, it's very. I think that there's a thirst for it in the culture at large because of the way communication is gone in the broader culture. So I think estuary can play a huge role in that.
yeah, yeah. It's exciting. I was wondering where you think all of this is going because we're seeing like AI coming to the picture. People are losing their jobs. People are because I know for Vervaeke said that he thinks theology will be the most important discipline in the next decade. And so I was wondering, like Estuary, this little corner, I think it's becoming more prominent. People are thinking about these questions. Where do you think this is going yourself?
I think that is such a great question and one that's important to ask if we're going to keep participating in it. Well, one of the things I learned very in moving from someone that was lurking
Sorry, I lost you
and
for a little bit. My bad.
oh yeah, I was saying one of the lessons one of the things I've learned in moving from someone that was just someone lurking and watching
Yeah,
consume content to someone participating is that the different participants, different characters have very different, not very, but different visions to what this little coder is doing. But there is some places where there's agreements. So I don't think where this little coder goes will be off the back of someone's intention, someone's got a vision, and we're all just following it. I don't think that's the case. I think there are different visions of finding similarities and following it. I think firstly, the 3 years now that I've been paying attention to the Little Corner, I've seen more people outside of Little Corner having conversations that's along the same line as this. I think Joe Rogan's one that it's very interesting to watch the way his conversations is developing around the meaning crisis and faith and those sort of things. I think Vivek on Rogan would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think there's a realization in broader culture that something's wrong. That at least that something is wrong. There's brokenness in our communication, and that something is wrong. Now, I think what the has been working on has been the diagnosis of what's wrong. And I think we're coming to a point where the Little Corner will provide answers to questions that the broader culture is asking.
Yeah.
And that's where I say this is going. I don't see this remaining a niche subsection of the internet for too long.
Yeah.
In terms of the channels, they might remain small, but the conversation and the work that they're doing, the meaning crisis conversations, the Christian ecumenism conversations, we've got a sick shout out to my brother Raj in the corner. Is like, so all of this different, the way all of these different parties can have communications. Firstly, I think is important that the fact that we're practicing dialogos, I think is a feature that the broader culture desperately need, because people on opposite sides of the culture world don't usually have places where they can have conversations with each other. It's usually just debates. So I think that's one thing the Little Corner offers. So I see it as, I think Vivek uses the term winning the culture. And I think that's what this Little Corner is training people that will be able to win the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I really recognize what you're saying. I think a lot of people are asking themselves these questions, and I think that people are realizing that materialism is just not enough. And it's funny to see how, that's because I was thinking about quantum physics. I'm going to speak about this with Karen tomorrow. Because basically, to go a bit back, like right now there's a really big trend of like multiverse theory and all these theories to somehow make this life make sense. Because back in the day, the materialist paradigm was fine without multiverse theory, but then quantum physics came to the picture. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. Long story short, we've got all these ridiculous ideas about what reality actually is, and people are like scratching their heads like, what are we actually supposed to do with this? And I saw the other day there was an intelligent design person on Joe Rogan's show, and you see Rogan like completely change in his views, because I remember I've seen clips of Rogan like completely trashing Christianity. Like,
that's exactly what I was alluding to about his growth and the way his perception, understanding of spiritual practice is changing.
I think if he gets Viveki on and like Pajot after, would be like, it would go crazy.
Matteo Pajot and Joe Rogan would be epic.
Yeah, I really just hope he gets it, because Joe really is a materialist in many ways. Like, he isn't, but he is in a way.
I think it's difficult not to be a materialist in the Western context. That's been the prevailing thought for at least throughout the 19th century till now.
I think that for me, it's still in my software. I spoke about this with my dad. Like, it's my software, and it's hard to kick it. Like, I'm trying to view the world symbolically, but it's been so ingrained that you still think the world is particles, and the way that affects your worldview is crazy. It's like everything is almost determined, and it just doesn't suffice.
I'm currently listening to an audiobook, Charles Taylor's A Secular Age, which Paul recommends, and it's very it illuminates a lot of things. You see, just even Christians, even me as a Christian, been a Christian all my life, just reading that, thinking, oh, pretty much been a secularist of my life. That's been the frame that I was born into. That's the frame in which I accepted my Christianity into.
Yeah.
I just sort of boxed my faith into the secular frame and trying to break out of it, like you said, it's not an easy thing. The
No.
easier to default to the natural software, and it takes practice and years and years of relearning.
Yeah. Unlearning and relearning. Yeah. It's
Mm.
but the funny thing is it's not just about secular people that don't have a religion. It's exactly for the atheist Christians that call themselves Christians but don't realize that their entire faith is based on materialism. And it's yeah, I think it's gonna be relearning for so many people.
It's
Um,
it's one of the most frustrating things that I'm observing at Speakers Corner is I listen to both Christians and Muslims debate, but they debate within this narrow box of materialism of
yeah,
trying to which one of them kind of mechanically disprove the other one. And it's like, oh, you're using the wrong tools to play with these
yeah.
matters.
It's a losing game. And those are the people that talk to Sam Harris, you know. It's like the
Yes. Like, no, no, that's exactly those are the people that I talk to, the seminar, the materialist. Yeah,
I
but
don't
it's very interesting though. I'm going from because I went from Chino, and then the Sunday after I landed, I was at Speaker's Corner. Going from the conversation I was being at Chino, where people of different faiths, of different levels and different stages in their faith journey, are having deep conversation, deep respectful dialogues amongst each other. Just anywhere you could go into different group and you would join in a great conversation. To the Speaker's Corner, where it was just it felt like I was in a time machine. I went back in time.
yeah.
2013, the early days of the new atheist, and just those form of them. Like, oh, you guys are so behind the times.
Yeah.
But part of my what I see as my purpose is updating that. Like I
Yeah.
think by starting history there, I can sort of begin to update the way conversation can take place amongst people of different faith.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. I uh I listen to Peterson when he says that you should figure out what bugs you and then do something about it. And what's always bugged me is first my own materialism and second the that materialism or reductionism in other people that I really just want to speak to them and just unprogram and just learn with them together because like I had to go through this myself as well. I'm still going through it. Um, I think that's a big part of of what I'm supposed to do. And I don't think we realize that this is like a phase that humanity is going through. Like throughout our human history, we've always been religious and we're religious right now, but we just think we're not. So we adopt cults and
That's the what you just said there is so important because that's news to a lot of people. It was news to me
yeah,
to find out that with like the religious frame, the symbolic framing has been the most prevalent framing, and this scientific materialistic scientific materialistic framing is very young. It's just and we've just adopted it, but also it's been so powerful and so
yeah.
effective in giving us technological powers that it's difficult to dissuade people of the recency bias that we owe towards it.
I think it's the power it yields on earth that makes it such a powerful thing for us. And I think we put it at the place of God. Like I think there's a thinker I like, and he doesn't call it scientistic; he calls it scientism. Um, so so it's like a myth that you adopt. It's your central myth is the myth of science, and it's actually an anti-myth. Like it's completely delusional. It's taking the map for the territory and realizing that reality is so much more rich. I think can be very beautiful. So I really want to give that to people without seeming like I'm sort of some superior person. Like I'm really not. I just found out a little bit earlier, and I'm just trying to give this to
In
people.
which way? In which way would you want like to give that to people?
I usually speak to people, figure out how they think about the world, and then I want to challenge them a bit in their beliefs. So I've had like multiple very long-winded conversations with people that are a bit closer to me, like I have some level of trust, and then they ask me about my faith, for example, because they're really not used to a Christian, especially in my country. They don't exist. And I wear
And
my
one this young,
sorry.
and
Yeah.
one this young,
Yeah, they don't understand it.
young
So
Christian.
no, I
What
always
are
wear
you
my
stupid?
doesn't exist. So I wear my cross and I get comments about it. And it's kind of one of the reasons I wear it is to get a conversation out of it. So that's usually how I do it. And it's like I get people to hear that the story is not a science book. You don't you don't it's not a biology curriculum that you're reading here. It goes actually so much deeper than that. And giving them some tools, some online tools can help. And yeah, just this going into a dialogue. It really differs per person for me how I speak about it. But
One of the things I really enjoyed about your conversation with Karen was you detailing just how easy it is to go up and and start a conversation with people, because I think that's something that a lot of people, especially my generation, so I can only imagine your generation,
yeah,
are suffering from this anxiety of just speaking to another person. It's an actual, I think, one of sadly calls it the intimacy crisis, or
yeah,
the hello crisis,
yeah,
which is just the fear, the paralysis fear of just going up to someone new and striking up a conversation. I think that it's a temperamental plays a part as well. Some are more extroverted than others, but still, there's a real problem with the anxiety that groups people and start a conversation with someone they've never spoken to.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I must say for myself, like I was always an introverted person. I never thought it was easy to speak to people. Um, so I would really encourage people, like it's something you can really train. And at first, it can be overwhelming to speak to someone new and to just like talk to strangers. Um, but the more you do it, the more you can see the beauty in it. The more you can realize, like, wow, this is actually one of the most beautiful things you can do. And I said on the podcast then that it's some of the most meaningful parts of my life that I have these conversations with people. And you just realize how much depth there is to just a single person, and that's true for most all people. Um, if you
Especially
allow
when,
them,
if you're lucky enough that they get to share the story with you,
yeah,
you get
and
to just it's insane. Like, oh wow, there are people living lives very differently to I, and I think it's a blessing.
it really is. It really is. And I've heard so many people's life stories because somehow that just happens all the time. I'm just in conversation and they just share their entire life story. I don't know exactly how that happens, but
Because people are people want to be listened to. People
yeah,
want to that relationship to be have someone they can talk to and feel listened to and share their life with. We're communal creatures.
yeah. I think we're realizing that again. Uh, so in many ways, Tayo, this is like it's really a blessing that we're able to do this, and I'm really blessed with this responsibility. I feel to connect, to be a bridge, and especially now we're speaking about this just now, like AGI coming into the mix. People really starting to ask these questions, like if AI can do this and if AI can do that, what is my value? And I would love to show people that because they have so much value, and I'm really excited to see it unfold. Um, cautiously optimistic, as I like to say.
Cautiously optimistic. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Now we've drifted off a bit from your story, but I like the direction it's gone into. We've
I
discussed
do.
Jordan Peterson a bit. I wanted to ask you a bit more about him because he is maybe not a person all of us agree with, but someone that's so impactful. And I was wondering personally for you, how has he impacted you, and what do you disagree with him on?
So that's a very good question, and it's one that also came up quite a few times at the Chino conference. Um, I think Jordan Peterson just Jordan Peterson is you can't tell the story of this little corner without including the name Jordan Peterson, because one of the most popular popular stories you hear is I found Jordan and then I found Jonathan and then I found, yeah, but it often starts with Jordan Peterson. And one of the reason personally for me, I discovered Jordan on Joe Rogan, and what attracted me to him was he was at a time where there was the new atheists, the Sam Harris's, a lot of intellectual people were very skeptical of religious stuff. He took it very seriously. Like he took those stories that were important to me as a kid. He took them seriously in ways that most intellectuals didn't at the time, and he was asking questions that I don't think even pastors were. It was reading them in ways that even pastors weren't able to elicit. Like the way the things he got out of the Cain and Abel story still amazes me. I've used his framing to explain that to kids in Sunday school and kids in youth club, because it's just so
Amazing.
powerful. So he's been very important in that sense. Um, but I think you referenced this. My introduction to Jordan Peterson was as a self-help guy. I thought that was I thought that was the main thing he had to give. And a lot of my friends who are more uh materialist in a way, like they're just looking to gain as much material wealth as they can,
Yeah.
use Jordan similarly to they use the Rich Dad Poor Dad books, the just the collection, the 48 Laws of Power. There's a
Yeah.
section of books that you collect when you're a young man
Of
trying
course.
to level up. You go through those books, and Jordan played that role. So that's the role I casted him for a long time. As okay, he's the self-help guy, but boy does he have very interesting things to say about religion. Now, I was not lucky enough to discover that he had a biblical
Mm.
lecture series. I didn't know all of it. I just knew him from my friends as the self-help guy, and I saw him on Rogan, and I was like, love what he has to say about religion and especially the stories in the Bible. Um, but Jordan's biggest impact in my life was introducing me to Peugeot, because I can't explain. Generally, I physically cannot put into words the impact that one conversation with Peugeot has on my worldview.
Yeah.
Um, I was yeah, I still can't put into words. It was a mystical experience, and it lasted for weeks where I was debating with God, so to speak. I just wrestling with God. Like, what does it mean to be a Christian?
Mm.
How do I instantiate this in my life? And that was triggered by that one conversation. In terms of the things I disagree with Jordan, I am very much not political,
Yeah.
and I think Jordan's gone more political. Now, understandably so, because the other side, the woke side that he's fighting against, have made his life a living hell. They have attacked him at every turn. So I can understand that just the human nature to just want to fight back and push back against them. But I find Jordan most helpful when he's talking to deep thinkers, usually not necessarily spiritual. Vivek is one that a deep thinker that's not really preaching religion. But just those type of things that are dealing with the meaning crisis, people that are dealing with the underlying problem of the culture war rather than fighting the culture war.
Yeah.
And that's the only critique I would like for Jordan, is spend more time dealing with the underlying cause than fighting the culture war.
Yeah. I hear you loud and clear. I think a lot of us agree with this assessment. I feel that Jordan, it might be his part to play, but he speaks so much about the Bible, about Christ, about being the best person in the best way for your relationship, for the people around you. And I wish he would work more on being more Christ-like himself. But I understand, like you say, this might be something that he has to do, or part of his life, part of his mission.
Yeah, that's why I even hesitant to sort of offer any criticism
Yeah.
towards him. But I truly, one thing that I don't think you can accuse him of being is being insincere.
Yeah.
I believe
Absolutely.
that he truly believes that he's fighting a just cause, and it's fight that the fight is important. Now, I'm not knowledgeable enough to say what is or isn't an important fight, and that's something he's going to have to answer to God for, which fights, which is the one I've got to answer to God for myself. So I'll focus on me and figure out which of the fights I need to fight, which one I need not to
Yeah.
fight. And very, very extremely grateful to Jordan for just the way he's changed my life, quite frankly. But unfortunately, I think like a lot of people, I've not watched a lot of his content quite recently because of the
Yeah.
political.
No, it's true. I think it's interesting that sometimes I get in my algorithm, I get people that watch Sam Harris's videos, like little debates, and then sometimes there's a Jordan Peterson clip in there, and the comments are always very similar. It's like, oh, this guy makes so much sense. He's so strong intellectually, but he has this he can't get rid of his religious tendencies. And I'm like the complete opposite way thinking about him. It's like that's his strength.
Lean into the religious tendencies.
Yeah, that's where you shine. But it's he's a phenomenon. Like I'm glad to be able to witness this event of a man.
Phenomenal is the right word. He is a phenomenal.
It's crazy. I watched him in close to here in Rotterdam a couple of months back, and you can really see what impact he has on people. Like it's a fully packed theater he was in, and he spoke so much beauty into the world. And then it started to get political, and you see this little thing go on inside of him, and people love it. They ate it up. Like they got like this. You felt the spirit of Kane just like emerge inside of the theater. People were like clapping for the controversial things, and me, my dad, and my brother were looking at each other like, Shh, this is not.
That's not the one we came for. Yeah, it's
No.
very interesting. I wonder how much audience capture plays a role because there's a huge segment of his audience that are here for the culture war,
Yeah.
and I'm not completely against fighting culture
No.
wars. Like there are at some point everyone has to draw a line and say, okay, this I'm not going this.
Definitely.
So I'm not against it, but I think it was doing so much value at just bringing up the underlying structure of the culture. When post pre 2018 Jordan was phenomenal even in people that were trying to get him into debate. I think of his conversation in the UK on Channel 4 with that woman who was just trying to bait him into all of this cultural war topics, and he
Yeah.
just ran circles around her until she was like, I give up, you were right, you caught me in my own loop. So I want more of that, Jordan, and
Yeah.
I feel like he's now settled into one side of the culture war rather than grasping with what's going on here.
Yeah. I think he'll get back to it though. I think we all have our warrior phase, and I think that once he gives into a spiritual tradition, I think he'll be humbled, and he become a bit wiser through it, and more love, let's say. Um, I have a minute left, so I want to wrap it up for today. But I really enjoyed this. I'd love to speak again. I'm very inspired by you. I think that you have so much to give, and I really, really appreciate how much responsibility you take on. I really appreciate the role you play in this little corner, and I'm so excited to see it continue. I really want to see you on different channels as well. I loved you on Karen's. I hope to see you return there as well. And
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Luke.
thank you
It's
for
been
your time today.
again.
All right, I'll see you.